I will say that I was kind of surprised. I was kind of caught completely blindsided by this because I never thought this would be the case. I thought everyone wanted to come to Quebec. I thought people loved coming to Quebec, right?
Yeah.
Apparently not. Headline of the story is 2 words long, and we're going to find out more, but it says everything. The main warning to people, immigrants wanting to come to Quebec, 2 words: avoid Quebec. And this is immigrants talking to other immigrants. So we want to find out more. Claire LUNAY is founder and president of Le Québec, nous, aussi, and she is on the line right now. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Listen, as I said, I was quite surprised by this. I'm reading some of the quotes, so let me just read a couple, and then you can talk about what it is you're doing, why you think this is happening. So here are some excerpts from messages published in a private group on Facebook. For newcomers, Quebec is clearly the province to avoid when immigrating. If I have advice for immigrants, avoid Quebec. Between us, immigrating to Quebec is long and hard. Better to aim elsewhere. And then finally, if you go to a province other than Quebec, it's much easier and faster. You know, if I didn't know better, I would have thought the CAQ might have written that. I mean, it's as anti-immigrant as you can imagine, but these are people telling other people in their same situation, hey, we're doing you a favor, don't come here. So, Claire, talk a little bit about this. Why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, well, you said it was almost coming from the CAQ. I think the message has been loud and clear and heard, basically, because this is mostly the consequences of two main things that happened in the past few years. So the CAQ made major reforms in immigration in 2020, changing the eligibility for permanent residency, mostly for international students as well as skilled workers. So that sort of sent a message already that it's going to become harder to really project your life here in Quebec if you were coming to study or to work. And at the same time, the government of Canada, the federal government, made it much easier for international students and workers, specifically Francophone ones, to become eligible for permanent residency. So there was sort of this double message that it's easier to go to Canada and it's harder to go to Quebec. So this is sort of the general advice that immigrants were sharing to each other, because a lot of people went through the process and were a little bit scarred from it. So they wanted to warn their fellow immigrants to not go through the same issues.
And it's kind of heartbreaking, honestly. So these are people who've had a bad experience themselves, who are looking to others who would like to forge a better life for themselves and saying, that's not going to happen here, or it's too complicated for it to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, it usually works like that in immigration communities, because we have to believe a little bit like the word of the government, but mostly we trust the people who are on the ground and who tell us how it is here. And with the reforms put forward by the government, as well as the messaging that's been repeated in the past few years, a very strongly negative messaging by the government, it sort of sends a message, you know what, go somewhere else.
Claire,
so we're sort of sharing that.
Is it the same amongst Francophone, between French-speaking immigrants and other languages? Or like, how are you seeing this in terms of a linguistic divide?
Honestly, yeah, it's basically across the board. I mean, all the messages you read, I guess you translated in your head, but they were written originally in French, right? This is actually coming from a private group that's mostly with Belgians and French people. It's mostly Francophone group.
Wow.
So we see that across the board, yeah.
And so that's where I find it really confusing, because the CAQ actually wants those kinds of immigrants. They want French-speaking economic immigrants to come here. And so even they are being deterred.
So French-speaking, you know, on one side of their mouth, and on the other side of the mouth, we really don't want more immigrants. So is that kind of the message that we're getting here? Do you think at least that's the message immigrants think the government is sending?
It's definitely the message that's been sent ever since that reform of the PEQ program in 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, with the announcements that we heard last week, there's been a bit of a change of tone, because clearly the government realized its mistake, because we saw the number of international students coming to Quebec staying the same or even increasing, but then the number of international students who applied to stay permanently in Quebec significantly decreased, growing from 8,000 in a given year to about 2,000. So they saw that there was an issue, that they made a mistake with the reform in 2020, so they had to go back on it.
I'm almost wondering at the end of the day, if this is the message that immigrants are taking from the government. So again, you have the government on the one hand saying, we want French-speaking, immigrants to come here. We're welcoming them. A week ago, I guess it was, the government held that press conference and that number of 60,000 immigrants came up. So the message seems to be, yes, we're willing to take in immigrants, but the message that immigrants are getting seems to be, go somewhere else in Canada. It's going to be a lot easier to do it than to come here.
Yeah, well, the thing is, because there's a huge difference between what the government says and what the actual policies are. And this is why immigrants warn each other, because it's like, hey, the government is saying Francophones are welcome, but actually on the ground, if you look at the process to apply for permanent residency, it's much harder in Quebec than in Canada. So it's sort of like, believe the actions, not the words,
One of these messages that really stood out to me, Claire, was them saying basically that François Legault likes things the way they are, and that Quebec is closing its doors to immigrants, but the rest of Canada opens its arms. And I think about the labor shortage that we have. I think about the lack of nurses. I think about the lack of doctors. And I think about people who we really could use in our workforce here who are reading that and going, oh, I'm welcome with open arms in the rest of Canada. Why would I ever go to Quebec? How is this damage already done, Claire? How can this be undone?
A lot of damage has been done, for sure. With the announcements last week, we said the government noticed that and is trying to fix it. So they did go back on certain aspects, not all, of the reform of 2020. But it's gonna take time to rebuild that trust, because we saw, we heard what was said during the political campaign, especially last September, where the CAQ was talking about immigration as a threat, as a danger. They associated it with violence, and then there were straight up lies, saying, 80% of immigrants don't work. And we hear those things repeatedly, and we're sort of like, okay, we get the message. So we see a positive direction since last week, I guess, but it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of effort from the government to build back that trust with the communities of immigrants.
It's interesting when you consider now social media makes being able to share those opinions so much easier than it's ever been before, right? It's not simply about knowing a family member or a friend who did it. The information travels along social media, and then thousands of people are finding all this out. I'm wondering, did Roxham Road, do you think, and I realize it's not the same situation, but did Roxham Road have an effect on this?
Roxham Road, I'm not sure. It's a little bit different, but it sort of goes into the same messaging of the government, right? Because really it was about maybe 10,000 people a year that were crossing Roxham Road, when at the same time the government of Quebec is welcoming more than 250,000 immigrants on temporary status to Quebec. So it's sort of like a drop in the ocean, but they made such a big deal out of it, and always with, again, a very negative tone and messaging, that it sort of just reinforced the feeling that immigrants aren't really welcome in Quebec, unfortunately.
So to Natasha's point, is it too late to fix this? How do you fix this? Or is there an impetus, do you think, even to fix this? If this is the reaction that the government is going to see, we're talking about it today, it's obviously going to it is an issue. What do you expect will happen? Can it be fixed?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but how to fix it, I think it takes a complete change of tone from the government. We see that they have sort of acknowledged with their announcements that Quebec needs immigrants. Absolutely. There is a labor shortage, and even for the survival of the French language, we need immigration as well. So I think they need to completely switch their language and own up to it, and really be transparent with Quebecers, saying, hey, immigration is not a threat. Immigration is what's going to keep us alive as a nation. We believe in it, we welcome it, and we will invest in it to the height of its importance. Okay. And I think that would send, along with very concrete policies that follow that, a positive message to immigrants that would start to maybe fix the damage that has been done.
Claire, I thought you were going to say it's going to take a complete change of government.
Oops.
Because that would help.
Too.
That too would help. But anyway, thank you so much for your time today. Very interesting conversation.
Claire LUNAY, she is founder and president of Le Québec, nous, aussi. And again, reading some of those posts on Facebook, it's interesting to note as well, I'm reading them in English. They were posted in French.
Yeah, that tells
you
everything.
This is not a language thing in terms of, these are Anglos complaining about this. These are people who the government says they want here to begin with,
One of my dearest friends is French from France. If you knew what she had to go, and she's an accountant, what she had to go through in order to become, to be able to work and live in Quebec, and she's married to a Quebecer, it was brutal, years and years and years.
So to her point, they say one thing, they being the government, they seem to do another.